Hello, hello.
It's us. Who else have we got there? We got some people out there already. That is so cool. Yeah, we have. See up here, you can see.
20
There's
people.
Hamish.
Hello.
Hi, Hamish. How you
are
doing?
you? Well, it's me, Gigi, and my mum, Christie, here tonight.
That's
For
right.
Tuesday Night Live. I thought that I would give my
Girls rule.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. It's lovely to be doing this with Gigi. Rob had the privilege of doing it earlier on in the year, so it's nice me getting the opportunity. There's Chris.
Hi.
Hey, Chris, and Tom, I'm sure, is there as well.
Hi, Heather.
Heather, working from Shepparton. Okay.
There you go. Good old
Shepparton is, of course, regional.
Yeah.
So
3 cases today, then.
For them. And how many did we have?
We had 15 today.
15.
Hello, Kate, and hello, Nola.
There's Kate, and Kate is here because Gigi's on, right?
She's here every week.
Is she?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's good.
So, yeah, 15 cases today.
Not, that's
Not
a bit
great.
disappointing. And I'm really a little bit concerned about 2 weeks' time after everyone was at St Kilda Beach without masks and everything.
Yeah.
Because it's been so
We're so close.
tough.
We're so close to it, and everyone's sick of it. I don't think anyone's, thinking, oh, yeah, roll out another few weeks of lockdown.
No, absolutely not. And even just the 5Ks. And, it's interesting. We worked out the other day that if you go to your outer limits of 5Ks and the other person comes to you and it's their outer limits, but they've already been to the other outer limits, you actually are potentially, your reach is about 20 or 30 kilometers. So it's a decent amount of spread. So it's not just everybody in 5 kilometers.
The other thing worth noting is that our 14-day case average is now 10.6, and it has to be at 5, doesn't it?
5.
Before we go down to stage 3.
Yep. I heard a good model being mentioned recently where they were saying that the best thing with suppression would be to get it to a place where anyone who had the coronavirus was put into hospital, even if they weren't terribly sick. So if they could get the cases down to 20 active cases, for example, then they could support them and look after them while they were, and then we knew where everything is. Hello, girls. That's from
Hi, Elisa. Hello, Jordan.
Africa trip.
JP.
Yeah. We miss our African family. Absolutely.
I haven't been there since 2015 now.
2015.
Because when you guys went last, I was in year 12. Or no, I was first
we
year
went
uni or something.
Did we go in 2015? Yes, we did go in 2015.
Yeah, that was the trip with Elisa.
Yeah, that was
very
Elisa
fun.
Trip. Yeah.
Hello, Gaynor.
Hello, Gaynor. Please say Happy Christmas to my beautiful Graham and Wesley, of course.
Jordan says, hurry up and get the average down. I want good burgers. I cannot agree more.
You know what? Just make your good burgers. There's nothing like homemade beef burgers. Seriously.
But also tuck shop.
No, I love my burgers.
I was talking to a friend from Germany earlier this week, and she was saying that their hospitals are almost empty. So strange. And their numbers are actually on the rise. Oh. And it's just really strange. There's hardly anyone in their hospitals, but also
maybe
they have
got a lower age group population.
Maybe, but they also have bigger facilities, more ventilators, that kind of thing. And they've been basically shipping people from other parts of Europe to Germany to take care of them.
Right.
Which is fascinating. Germany's actually doing really well despite all of this.
Germany normally does everything with efficiency.
The Germans.
Brenda. Lovely to see you, Christie and Gigi. Brenda May. Lovely to see you, Brenda May. Fantastic.
Alrighty. Well, we got 42 people here.
Yes, and we've got some of your questions that we're going to answer from last week. Oh, no, the week before.
Some of the week before. Some are new for us. And also while you're watching, if you want to chuck up random questions last minute, feel free to do so. Just chuck some at us. We'll do our best, but it would be nice if we had a few questions just chucked out.
I know. See how we go with them.
Yeah, our first question is kind of dealing with the issues of misinformation and free speech. So very topical for the times, but something that I know you and Dad have been asked a lot about in this time has been, how do we combat misinformation?
Yeah.
But not just misinformation from random people, But how do we deal with that when it's our close friend?
I think it's an interesting thing you say that. Like, I get so shocked sometimes when people say to me, "Oh, so and so said such and such," and it's totally wrong or totally inaccurate. And I say, well, what did you say? Like, people need people to advocate. They actually need to help change the narrative. And I mean, that's something that we did. We're coming into the 18th World Day Against the Death Penalty on the 10th of October. And Rob will be sending out to the church. There's a YouTube link that you can watch. I think it's important that you consider looking at the movie Guilty again, because it's a reminder of the price that we paid and the heritage that we have in amplifying the voices of people who haven't really had their voices heard. And so basically, you've got some ideas, Gigi, but I mean, in our own way, we tried to, instead of calling Andrew and Maya and, two drug traffickers,
kingpins,
and whatever, we called them by their names. We call them the boys. We humanized them, and we started to change some of the narrative. Yes, they were terribly misguided young individuals, but then we changed the narrative.
It was interesting though, the way that the media called them like kingpins and godfathers. I remember Andrew just laughing his face off, thinking, "Well, godfather, like what kind of godfather is?"
Yeah,
like,
and again, that shows a total lack of knowledge, because like, people in the drug industry, they don't travel with their mules, so they were all mules, and
they'd be hanging out in their
villas. And that's important, that we are constantly. I think there's nothing worse than people getting stuck in their ideas, and they say that it only takes good people to be quiet for evil to prevail.
Oh. Who said that? Do you know?
I don't know.
I can't remember
it's a famous
either,
quote.
but I know that. And speaking of misinformation, we watched The Social Dilemma a few days ago.
Absolutely. Must watch Social Dilemma.
I forced my family to watch it as I was preparing an assignment on free speech and whether or not a concern for free speech in and of itself would justify restrictions of free speech. And I'll just read a little quote from that assignment. So I'm talking about a philosopher and a thinker called Nadine Strassen, and she had an idea on how to fight hate speech. Instead of focusing on restriction and censorship, she highlights the need to fight hate speech with more speech. Not silencing those accused of the former. As such, to deal with hate speech and forms of unpopular or offensive speech, we must offer counter speech, which is exactly what you were talking about with regard to the boys, is that there was this narrative of they're kingpins, they're this or that, the other. But you offered, and the church offered, counter speech to that media coverage, to whatever it may be, to offer, and I don't want to say alternative facts, but
to give
another side of the story,
and to give a new view,
and in some cases a more accurate story of what's actually happening,
and certainly current. I think that drilling down another level, I find it interesting when people listen to something that is not factual or not healthy or not helpful or not godly or not theologically sound, and they just listen instead of going, have you considered X, Y, or Z? So,
You're not in a patronizing way too.
And people say, oh, we just got to release people, or, people will do whatever. But the reality is that no, actually, it's our jobs to help people the Bible says that if we correct a brother in his way, it's important for us. We are responsible for the enlightenment that we have received. So with counter speech, it's interesting. There are times where you just put no oxygen on something. You just say, I'm just not going to say anything. It's best not to say anything. But isn't it awful? And how rude and psychologically damaging is it, the current trend where people just block you and they ghost you and they don't even
bit toxic. I understand.
To you.
I think we were talking about this earlier. Is like, understand if somebody is hostile and if someone's being abusive, blocking them might be the best option for all parties. But, if you have someone that's just got a little, views on something and you don't agree, and if you're close with them and you feel like you could be heard, and it's not a waste of space in your
well,
head,
are we told to
then
be
offer counter speech?
Because we're told to be ministers of reconciliation, and you know, we're God's voice on, you know, and we're His body, and if we can't aim towards reconciliation, and I'm talking about politeness, you know, you may you know, not want to have a text message from someone or something like that, but just say, actually, I need some space, instead of just ghosting
communicating
people.
your boundaries. It's hard, but also it serves you and the other person. It gives them the dignity. It dignifies them. It's just a common decency kind of thing. Yeah. But I mean, that's gone off track a little bit. But in terms
we were talking
of
about
misinformation,
when you do counter speech, and when you, because there's no point in if you send a text message to someone and they want to argue all the time or try and enlighten you, that's not going to help. Yeah.
It's always the other people that need enlightening, right? Never us.
Well, I think there's lots of enlightening that I need.
I'm fully enlightened, just so everyone knows. If you have any questions to ask a fully enlightened person, please put them in the comment section.
It's interesting, even with that, you know, we used to use the comment, we would speak up for the voiceless. And it sounds like it's so patronizing, because it sounds like they have no voice. Rather, what we need to do is actually prioritize their story, prioritize their voice, amplify their voice instead of our own voice.
Unless you're standing up for like mute people, well, then you probably need to speak for them. But on other occasions, dignify their voice. Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I've said that in the past, you know, be a voice for the voiceless, and it's lovely.
We all have.
It's lovely, and it's a lovely sentiment. But yeah, why not, if we have the mic, pass it on?
Absolutely.
We have some,
but these are all things that we can learn, you know, and pass on to people. We have a question.
Nola Ellis, is it right that we don't have to justify why? I'm not sure.
Is it right that we don't have to justify why? I'm not sure. Maybe, Nola, if you can put something else on there. In respect of saying to someone that we just need some space. No, we shouldn't have to say why, but I think it's very, very cruel. I don't know your situation, but I've had situations where people have just cut all communication, and these are people who you've had in your life, you've had in your home.
They're not just, you know, acquaintances.
Yeah, they're not. Yeah, and it's actually psychologically damaging. Now, they may be feeling unhappy with you or whatever, but I think as a Christian, we have to rise above that and go, you know what? Right now, I am not ready to talk or not ready to chat. I just need some space, and I wouldn't justify it, and I wouldn't tell them why unless you wanted to. So yeah.
Why not? If we have the mic, why not pass it on? Yeah, absolutely. Use your privilege, friends. Well, I feel like we've done a good job on that one.
Yes, I think.
Is there anything else you can
okay. So look, how could this be applied to misinformation, conspiracy theories being spread during the COVID crisis? So I had an example, and I had Josh, we have Josh Van Otterloo on staff, who's a scientist, which, you know, a lot of people think that science and God like go like this. And actually, I find it goes like this. And so we were talking to someone, great woman who loves God, and she said, oh, you know, but I've heard this doctor say that the coronavirus is a hoax, and also, you know, the virus is not going to stay on you if the blood of Jesus is on you. And I'm like going, that theory doesn't really work, because we know pastors who have died from coronavirus in Indonesia. We know pastors, one of them whom Rob interviewed, who had coronavirus for 72 days.
And it's it's actually insulting.
So,
I think.
But I had to also be careful, because here's this situation. So we've got the scientist, we've got me, we've got this person, and you know, we were both like, I wanted to just like get my mouth off the ground and pull it back up again, and I had to say, well, I think I'd be looking at the science, and I think I'd be listening to the doctors who, you know, are working with this field.
And the men who Dad interviewed that had a horrible time. And, you know, just to question someone's faith who had gotten COVID.
Yeah. Oh, it's horrible.
It's just a little bit, it's
a horrible
nasty
thing to do.
Yeah.
Well, it's very judgmental and very it's hypocritical. And, it's like Job's friends, all of them were
great friends.
Like, why is this happening to you, Job? So I think we have to be careful, but we can say gently that, look, I think that, a worldwide conspiracy, you'd have to pay an awful lot of people to, build mass graves in Italy. And you talk to any of the people who are on the front line, respiratory nurses or whatever, it is a virus. It's a real deal. And I think we've got to be really careful as well. A lot of people who can't kind of make it in some particular areas tend to try and make it in the counter argument. They try to gain power by knowing some information. So we have to treat it delicately.
I feel like that goes with like our human nature of wanting to understand what's happening. At least for me, like the uncertainty of now and the future, it really bugs me, and it would help, I think, to be able to believe in some mastermind conspiracy that is, dooming us all, because that is almost preferable to know what's happening, even if it's bad, than to not know what's happening at all. Maybe
for some people, but I think that just even to simple practical things, I say to people, have you checked those facts out? Where was that written? Have you considered who that person is aligned with? All these things are good things that can help. I like to go into conversations and come away with some new thoughts. Doesn't mean that I'm always comfortable with the new thoughts, but
but you've opened your mind and you've allowed it into your scope of reference. I mean, you don't want to have your mind so open that your brains fall out, but you also did a drawing based on that once. But also, you want to be able to hold a conversation with a variety of people with a variety of opinions. Katie Armour just wrote here, sometimes it's hard because we are so polarized. If you try and put an opinion across that is even slightly controversial, you can open a can of worms. We seem to have lost the art of open, honest discussion, not sure what the answer is. I mean, to be honest with you, I don't think we ever grasped the art of an open conversation, but
I don't know.
Really?
I think, to be honest with you, I think it's interesting because some of the conversations I've had with people, one particular person, they were like, well, nobody else does what you're doing. And I'm like going, yeah, but you're saying that in relation to something you don't like. But what about all the things that you love about who we are and what we do? People are not doing those either. So we have to be able to sit in and realize that we are a very small part of a very big world. And I always say to people, would you rather be the smallest, most insignificant player on a losing team, on a winning team, or the most advanced person on a losing team? And most people would rather be a small fish in a big pond. But I think especially in the Pentecostal circle, it is, and even as social media expands, even in America, some of the people who we go, because they've been brought to Australia from America, and then you talk about them there, and a mainline Christian church doesn't even know about them. So I think we need to learn to open those cans of worms, but not to dangle them in front of people to irritate them or annoy them.
Or even to change their mind. I mean, what's worked for me in the past has been, Jesus did it, the Socratic method. I mean, just asking people questions and then making up questions based on their answers. I mean, I can't think of many times in the Bible where Jesus gave a straight up answer, but rather asked the person another question or told a story.
Yeah, and I think instead of completely disagreeing with something, if they say something, you just say, oh, that's an interesting sometimes I just say that's an interesting take. I haven't seen it that way. I think from what I've understood, it's more likely to be, or I've had several looks at this already. And I did think that at one point in time, but as I've studied it, or as new research, new information.
Think about where your evidence comes from. If it's anecdotal, share that. It's still completely valid. But, your story amidst 100 stories that have been brought together and collated by scholars and peer reviewed and put up on graphs and everything is a little bit different. I mean, you could fit right in amongst a bell curve, or you could be an outlier. You don't know. So you can't take one story to be representative of entire population.
And I think, like when people say, well, it must be true, I've seen it in the newspaper. Well, you only have to be the victim of that, and somebody says you're in one part of the world and you're actually in another, and that's not true. But there are some papers that are better than others. So for example, Reuters is one of the better news coverages. And there are websites that you can check. If you have a quote from somewhere, you can check, or a story that you can check, because, again, not on sending information that you haven't checked out. It's just, I don't think stupid.
Any of us with social media can say we've never been guilty of that. I've done that.
Well, we've been guilty of it because we haven't really thought it through and thought there's options.
Yeah.
And you've looked at the source of it, or at least I have.
I haven't always done that.
No, looked at the source as in who sent it to me. And I think, that must be okay.
Yeah.
And now I think, maybe they haven't checked it. Yeah. And it's not necessarily their fault, but it might not represent their views. So, yeah. Fake news is rampant. Yes, it absolutely is. It absolutely is.
Yes, everyone go watch The Social Dilemma.
So we're talking about how we can change that fake news and maybe put a counter argument.
Yeah, counter speech. You don't want to censor stuff too much. You don't want to restrict people's freedom to have an opinion or whatever, because I don't think that actually does any.
And I think there's a difference between an opinion and vitriol.
Oh yes.
If you start taking a person apart and actually psychologically damaging them, I think we've seen a bit of that in some of these presidential candidates as we've watched them. I've just gone, I don't really care about what they stand for, because as I watch them speak to each other as human beings, I just go, and this is leadership. It's scary.
Well,
but it's in every you'd expect in the House of Lords or in Parliament or whatever, you'd expect some kind of diplomacy.
Oh yeah.
And tact.
I mean, I remember one of my philosophy teachers saying that ad hominem attacks are the lowest form of argument.
Yep.
So, that's being displayed full throttle. Thanks, America.
Absolutely.
To any Americans watching this, I love you.
And there ain't no vaccine for stupid. Okay.
One day.
So, next question, Gigi.
I'll hand this to you. So, we've got a question here about divorce and remarriage. So reading the verses on divorce and surrounding verses, were Jesus' commandments meant to foster the protection of women in a harsh society? And could these verses be about the care for others? If yes, what do you think Jesus would say about an amicable divorce now? And when people change and realize they will never thrive in the marriage, is being released from it an act of love? It's a big question. I kind of looked at Matt 19 earlier today, because that's one of the, very important parts of the Bible with regard to divorce. And from what I could see and from what I know about it, is that Jesus is pretty concise in that don't divorce unless you've been unfaithful. There was not much else around that. What do you think?
If the person has been unfaithful, there's a space for divorce or death. I think that sometimes there's two questions here. There's the thought of divorce, which is, okay, just take it like that. And then there's the thought of divorce and remarriage. I always get very nervous if someone comes to me and says they're thinking of divorcing someone. What do I think about divorce? I said, no, what you're actually asking is, what do I think about divorce and remarriage? Because if you then decide to remarry, or as has happened on one occasion where somebody was thinking about divorcing because they wanted to marry someone else, I was like, well, you make a vow, you don't just get to change it that easily. So, I mean, my thought would be that I would never counsel anyone in a violent marriage to stay in a marriage that is detrimental to them in any way. And then after that, I think that, and obviously if the person has already gone to someone else, then the person is free to go. So
it's interesting. I was looking at the kind of what happens, what Jesus says after, basically, don't divorce unless you're unfaithful. Chapter 19, verse 4, have you not read that he who made them at the beginning made them male and female? And I think that could be extrapolated to be about protecting women in the society, that if you're not married, you're pretty much you're not a class that is very accepted.
Well, you've got to understand as well, in context, historically, a man, could come home and his dinner wasn't made and he just has to say 3 times, I divorce you, I divorce you, I divorce you, and the woman is divorced. Now, you might say, with today's knowledge, goodness me, that, I'd like to be free of that kind of man anyway. But what you've got to understand is that in biblical days, the marriage ticket was your whole support system, your whole provision, your shelter, your roof over your head. And would bring enormous shame onto your family if you had to go back into your family home.
So it is essentially a safety blanket in those days for women. So yes, I think that verse there is kind of bringing men back to their senses and thinking and saying, look, like, we're holding you accountable. Jesus is holding them accountable. You can't just divorce women willy-nilly just because you want another one or because you are basically sending them out into poverty or whatever it may be, to be shunned by society. And obviously that's not really the reality that women face today, at least here.
Years ago they did, but not now.
Not here in Australia for the most part. So I don't think that can be too much used today, besides saying that Jesus was, I would say, feminist. What do you reckon? Do you think Jesus was a feminist?
No, Gigi. No bumper star stickers, car bumper stickers, please, and no emails. No, I don't think Jesus was a feminist, but I think that he absolutely amplified the voice of woman. And I just think that it is so stunning that his mother Mary was a female version of him, and I love, if you read the Magnificat, especially in the Gospel of Luke, it's just stunning to see a young woman, speak truth to power. All right, let's see. I have met a Muslim woman who have been divorced simply for nothing, after their husband stated, I divorce you. Yes, still here in Australia. I know, it's so sad, so sad. Now, dysfunctional relationship. Is it okay to give up on a dysfunctional family relationship, non-Christian, which I don't think it matters whether it's non-Christian or Christian, when I have done as much as I can to restore a relationship over many decades? Well, the scripture tells us that we're to do as much as we can to live in peace with everyone, but we can't always do it. And often you have to, just act in grace. We had relationship with a couple several years back, probably 12 years back now, and it was a difficult situation when they left Bayside, and it was a very difficult time for everybody. And had I had my time over again, I probably would have done things differently. Regardless of that, the husband has reached out a few times, the wife not. During COVID, at the beginning of COVID, I reached out to them and said, look, we've got this and this and this. If you need anything, let us know. And no, we're fine. And then as COVID progressed, I thought, this is just a reminder that you don't want to have anything between you and anyone, let alone spiritually, between people. And these people are leaders. So I'm thinking, goodness me, you want to make sure that people who are leading a church or whatever, that there's nothing between you. And so, and also if you bump into them in the shops, it's embarrassing, all that sort of funky stuff. And so I rang and I said, look, I've just been thinking about this, and if there is any way we can have a cup of coffee, I'm not asking to be best friends or anything like that. And the person said, oh, look, I think I know what the answer will be, but I'll ask anyway. And I said, yeah, please do. And I said, and please get back to me and let me know. And they said, no, I won't leave you hanging. And, credit where credit's due, they didn't. And they got back about an hour later and said, no, they don't want to have a conversation. And just, I said, I understand, that's fine. And my heart is truly saddened that two grown women can't have a conversation about some things that happened 12 years back. But I also feel that I've done what I feel is right at the time, and that person, I have to totally be released and release them to think that they have done what is right. They felt that, you know, that was all they needed to do, or they didn't want to put themselves in that position. And the person got back to me, which is important.
That ties into what we were talking about.
Ties in, absolutely. You can't leave people, you know, I mean, jeepers, the amount of, you know, this, you know, it's abusive treatment.
The only time I can think that it's okay to kind of ghost people is if
they're threatening you.
No, but also if that person has reached out several times and you've said no before and they keep doing it.
Oh, then I would say to them, absolutely. Well, so I had a stalker, and even with that stalker, I called them and said, please do not call me again. I will no longer be responding to you. And, you know, I blocked them off, you know, all my things, and they found ways to get back to me again. But that's a different matter. There was threats involved in that.
Yeah.
That's a very different matter from people trying to be conciliatory.
So don't try and like go out of your way to reconcile with abusive people.
And I think, you know, Christians have got to think, hey, you know what? We got to be friends forever in eternity. So why keep enmity? I'm not talking about, you know, being friendly, but all that being said, you know, if you've done everything you can, then you've got to just leave it at that point. You don't know, there might be another thing asked of you down the track. Just leave it, release it.
Sometimes these things take time. I've had people who have hurt me and not realized until years later. And then I get a letter in my mailbox apologizing, things like that.
Yeah.
That, you know, sometimes it takes a while for people to go away, figure themselves out. And life experience. And then you never know. A reconciliation could just be a few years away.
And sometimes they may not even realize what they're doing to you. It's life experience that causes them to feel that way. And they go, oh my gosh, you know, I didn't realize that what I did had that impact on them.
And so you can always be open to that being a possibility. I mean, you don't have to hold your breath for people, but sometimes it can surprise you. People can surprise you.
Yeah, be prepared for the surprises.
For the next little bit, I just want to check.
Well, hang on. What happens if it's family members? Yeah, great question, Jen. I think with family members, the same thing. I think like you know, if you've got a family function and they're coming, be polite. If you know, maybe you have to release your expectations that they will ask you, they'll invite you, they'll make you included, but you do the right thing. You do the right thing because it's you, absolutely, and it's you that has to live with you. And, you know, if you're feeling prompted by the Holy Spirit to do something, you've got to be totally free and unattached to whether there's a response or whether there's not a response. You just do what is right for you. And then sometimes when I've done that, I'll just delete the message so that I'm not looking to see if there's a response or anything, because you're just doing what you do in obedience. Yeah. And with family members, you know, they're family members. They can't get away. And so you're stuck with them. You're stuck with them. Social media can be filled up with too much drama, which sucks up time. I agree, Bev, totally. And you know what? If I had my choice, I'd probably get off 90% of it. I would rather block certain people, filter what I expose myself to, and consider who I take advice.
There's also an option of kind of muting people for a certain amount of time. So you're not unfriending them, because that could cause further problems. But you can. I've done that. I've like silenced people for a time because I was getting sick of what they were.
And I think there's something different as well. There's a different level of relationship with a Facebook friend, but if somebody's texting you, and you don't respond, I'm not talking about, you know, not responding instantly, but after several days or months still haven't responded, you know, that can be.
I'm a terrible replier. It's not good.
Yeah.
Need to work on that.
Yeah, but you know when somebody,
I don't do it on purpose.
You know when somebody's doing it on purpose. All right.
The next section, I just want to put a trigger warning. We're going to be talking about family violence. So if that's something that you don't think will be helpful to listen to, maybe just click it off for the next 10 minutes and come back.
Oh, what even be 10 minutes?
Well, yeah, whenever. I just
We're
don't
not going to talk in
just
detail.
going to pop
that
up there. It will be mentioning it.
Yeah.
So the next 3 questions are to do with family violence. We got statistics tell us that members of the church perpetuate family violence against one another. In your experience, why do some terrorize their loved ones?
Well, I didn't know. I mean, I just thought that members of the church would be part of the general statistics. I didn't know that church people perpetrated violence any more than anybody else.
They don't.
No, that's what
statistically.
I thought.
So that question, I mean, it makes sense. Obviously, statistics will tell you that. But what I've found in my research, I've done extensive work into gender-based violence and family violence at uni, and there's no evidence to suggest that churchgoers perpetuate violence any more or any less than the average population, which I think is both really good that it's not more, but I also think it's really bad that it's not less. I mean, in the second part of that question is why do some terrorize their loved ones? And I would argue that at the point that you're terrorizing people, they're not your loved ones. So I don't think that that's an accurate way
I think
to say
sometimes that it's hard, you know, as a parent, I think sometimes you can be very demanding of a certain thing because you're fearful, and that might terrorize them, you know. Because I mean, we've had this talk. I raise my voice, you say stop yelling, and then you tell somebody I've yelled at you, they're going to think I've yelled at you like this, where in actual fact I'm going, Gigi, can you please, you know. So I think that sometimes it's fear-based, that people I don't think there's any place for violence at all, but sometimes when people I've seen it, when people are really, really concerned or worried, they've physically stopped somebody from going somewhere, you know, if they know they're going to be taking drugs or things like that, out of sheer fear.
Yeah, I feel like that's not, I mean, it's a good point, but at the same time, there's another element that comes into play when you're talking about domestic violence, and then the added layer of spirituality on top of that. When you're a churchgoer, you have an external authority source that you could put on your behavior that a person outside of church might not be able to say. So, you know, if the average guy, and I'm going to say guy because they're the majority of perpetuators. So, you know, a guy comes home and hits his wife, he can't say that God made him do it.
Absolutely not.
But a guy, you know, who goes to church could potentially pull out some Bible verses out of context and say, this is why I can do this. And so there's an added layer of fear, of manipulation, of spiritual. I was reading a study actually just today by Ben Goodley and Fowler. They did it in 2006, talking about the need to include spiritual abuse in conversations about domestic violence. And this is not gendered, you know, like, you know, just in general, we need to talk about spiritual abuse when it comes to family violence, because, and I'm not talking about, you know, you can't read Harry Potter, you know, as being spiritual abuse, but, you know, people manipulating, saying this is why I can do this to you because my faith says so. And, you know, it can be, just an added worry. You know, so it's so I mean it's good to know that church people aren't perpetuating violence at a larger extent than the average person, but it's something we need to talk about for sure.
And violence is not all that it seems to be. Violence is not always loud, and it can be very quiet, and it can be it can be neglect is also as bad as violence.
Not letting someone access to finance to get their daily things or whatever it may be, and
I mean, controlling, you know, with COVID, you know, it is. I mean, of course, there's going to be anxiety, but it's a perfect opportunity for people to control their partners.
absolutely.
You know, more than normal.
Yeah.
And I've
It's
seen
happened.
it.
Well, more people have been dying as a result of intimate partner violence than pre-COVID times, which is terribly sad. I mean, there's a lot to say on this topic, but on the 4 things that I notice generally across the board on research and literature on intimate partner violence when it comes to the church, there's 4 main kind of things that at least 1 in 5 men who abuse their Christian wives go to church regularly. I'm not saying that these men are Christians. They go to church. I think there's a big difference there. Yeah. Clergy are regularly dealing with domestic violence. So pastors, youth pastors, young adults, they're regularly dealing with this stuff. Maybe not, I'm not sure about you, but this is something that has been seen across the board in research. The other thing is abuse seems to occur at the same degree inside the church as outside, like we said before, and there's little to suggest any protective effect of church attendance on perpetration of domestic violence. And I think that's something that we need to work on as a community, that we build up a kind of a faith community that doesn't stand for this stuff, that can spot it and can hold people accountable and can notice the signs of these kinds of things, so that the church is a protective space for women and for men who come forward about intimate partner violence. The next part of that question is, do you think we spend too much time demonizing the perpetrator and should spend more time to understand how our society created the behaviors?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. And I think that we always should look at, how did we get in this mess in the first place? And, you know, when I hear people talking about, I don't know, whether it's, you know, reality TV people and, you know, something like that, I think to myself, well, you know, you guys buy the magazines, or, you know, or go on Instagram or whatever. Like we have created a certain desire for knowing the intimate details of people's lives, and that is, I think that's crazy. I just think that's a you know, even down to thinking. I think we've lost the art even of thinking. We want people to think for us, and that in itself perpetuates you know, bigger problems. We create behavioral problems because we don't stop to think for ourselves. You know,
who said what's your thoughts, they become your actions. What's your actions, they become your life, or something along those lines.
Yeah, that's right. You think it, you feel it, you say it, you do it.
Yeah. So things as a mustard seed. And you know, I don't think that these things have necessarily gotten worse. I think that we've made quite a lot of progress in terms of intimate partner violence, but it is still an epidemic in Australia. You know, one woman a week is one too many, and I think that there are things that add to this culture of violence, and to maybe silence women. We don't talk about it enough.
Or if you talk about it, you're called a feminist. And if
worst thing in the world.
Worst thing in the world. And if you, you have to be, I think, you know, it's interesting. Where was it? I saw, we were watching the Netflix story of Hillary Clinton, because we've never, I wanted to watch that, because I've heard people who have been, regardless of her politics, but I've heard people who've been near her who have said, as a woman, she has achieved, you know, some incredible things.
Very reputable. I didn't even know.
But we were watching this, and then, you know, one minute they want her to be their champion, and the next minute they hate her.
Go make me a sandwich.
And it's this concept of, you know, and Australians have got to be exceptionally careful of this. I still can't get it into my head, you know, this tall poppy syndrome thing. And I have lived here now more years than I lived in Ireland, but your formative years are so important, because I genuinely am happy when people get things or are blessed by things. And yet I realize that that there are very few people who actually do celebrate. People envy, people are jealous, and it's like, they're jealous of women's accomplishments as well.
Well, it threatens the dominant narrative of masculinity, doesn't it?
Yeah. But also, so like when I had my babies, there was no such thing as paid maternity leave. There was no such thing as...
Yeah, that's something that feminists did for you,
If you didn't, they not only have they leave for the mums, they have paternity leave. And I think it's great. I think it's absolutely wonderful. I just thought at the time, keeping your job was a major triumph, I think. But that came with a huge cost as well. But it amazes me that some of the women, and some I know who have gone ahead, it's funny to see they've made a way for people, but the other people don't realize the way that they've made.
Yeah, it's interesting. We've got a question here following on from that. Joy Etweld, is some churches preaching submission by the woman perpetuating violence against them? What do you think?
Is some churches preaching submission by the woman perpetuating violence against them? I would hope not, Joy, because that scripture also talks about that men are to love their wives as the church.
Submission doesn't have to equal a doormat.
No, and laying your life down, that's what the men are asked to do. So if they're doing their role properly,
what's the difference between submission and laying your life down?
Well, submission is just submission is a desire to acquiesce to the final decision or whatever.
So I think those
laying your life down is pretty major,
misconstrued to be manipulative and abusive, but I don't think they're in and of themselves, if you take it as submission actually being strength. But I don't think that it should be manipulated that way. And absolutely. If it is, then I think get out of there.
Absolutely.
Get out of it.
Just while we've got everybody here, I must tell you that Alpha is starting on Wednesday, the 14th of October. And if you haven't done it and would like to do it, you should really consider getting onto that. Just go to the Bayside website and go to Event Alpha. Steps to God this Saturday, the 10th of October. BaysideChurch.com. Again, Steps to God. Get on board with that. That's amazing. It's been going so well. And Step to Church on Saturday, the 7th of November on the website. Go to events, Bayside Steps to Church, and that'll be great.
Beautiful. Well, moving on then, what are you currently reading or studying in the Bible, Mum?
Oh my goodness, we're just checking.
We've got about 10 minutes left. We're fine.
Okay. We've got so many things to talk about. So I'm doing a bit of study in the Psalms, which I love. I find the Psalms very helpful because the Psalms are all about dislocation or disorientation.
Dislocation?
Yeah, you dislocate it from a current thought or belief. So you're like,
like deconstruction.
And then you're relocated in a betwixt and between place in the middle of nowhere, but things are not the way they were. You don't know what they're going to be like, but you have to accept that this is new. And then it's about reorientation or reconstruction into where, God's new space for you. So I always find the Psalms are very helpful because the Psalms are supposed to be read one line as a question, and the next line is, the response. They're responsorial Psalms. So I find them, helpful in that way. Sometimes, why are you downcast, O my soul? And then there's a response. So I've been finding that great, and just asking God to accelerate the process of dislocation so that I can areas where I need to be relocated and areas that you just have to go now. And so I kind of think that the Psalms, please nobody quote me on this, but I am going to quote you. The Psalms are kind of help you to Marie Kondo your some of the things that got you this far, their pressure, but now they're not it's not that you ever throw away any of God's word, but it's how you've looked at it and how you've read it. And now there's fresh light, fresh bread, at I got up in the middle of the night last night for a midnight snack, which I shouldn't have done. But anyway.
I heard you.
And the bread had mold on it. I was so looking forward to that bread, and it had mold on it.
That's devastating.
No, that bread was bread. It would have nurtured. It would have looked after me. But now it just wasn't as fresh as it had been. And that's what, and God's word, you know, his light shines on his word and brings that freshness and brings that truth and that revelation. And as we study and as we read widely, you know, that's the other thing. You know, when we did, we were doing Bayside TV and the exchange, we had someone come in and they talked about big data, which is very similar to the social dilemma. And often when I'm studying, I will use other people's computers, or I will ask people who have a similar values, but maybe a slightly different worldview from me, to help me to broaden my approach on something. And yeah, I think the Psalms do that for me. They bring me into a bigger space. And often I find myself just, you know, no matter what the situation is, God, you're bigger than this, you're bigger than that, you're bigger than the next thing. And I just lay all the challenges out that I'm facing. So that's the Psalms. And also I've been rereading James, because I think James is one of the things.
When you think you're going well, read James.
I think James is a great book, because in lockdown, I'm seeing people really, you know, get thin in terms of resources, like in terms of internal resources. And it's just, you know, people say, oh, I'm good at feeding myself from the scripture and whatever. Yeah, but are you good at reflecting, digesting, and causing it to be fully become you, you know? And so, yeah, I find that, you know, in James, where it talks about, you know, just taking care of the stuff in our own backyard is just so important. And so I'm getting great joy out of that.
That's so good. I love that. Let's talk a little bit more.
What are you reading about?
Oh, you want to know what I'm reading about? So I just almost finished reading a book by Peter Enns called How the Bible Actually Works.
Oh yeah, he's also got a book called The Sin of Certainty. Yes.
Oh, so that's perfect with regard to what we've been talking about.
Mm-hmm.
But something that I get really excited about, it's a bit nerdy, but I get really excited about the dates that different books in the Bible were written, and how that compares to one another. So how they reference one another and things like this. But something that is new to me, and I discovered through reading this book, was that Nahum was written before Jonah.
Oh.
And Nahum tells the story about what happened in Nineveh, right?
Yes.
And it all burns down, right?
Yeah.
And then Jonah tells a story about how Jonah goes into a fish and he preaches to Nineveh and they all repent.
Yeah.
And that happened after Nineveh no longer existed.
Yeah.
And this blew my mind, because take it back to what we're talking about, rewriting our narrative and everything. That's exactly what the Hebrew people were doing in writing Jonah. Whoever wrote it, writing it after what had actually happened. It was rewriting their story instead of it being this point in our time was in any shape or form. It is rehumanizing for us, and it tells a new story, and I found that really exciting. What are you doing?
Well, I just was, when you were saying rewriting the story of Jonah is what it meant. Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
I thought you thought Jonah was the book of the Bible.
Jonah.
Yes.
It is. The story of Jonah.
The story of Jonah. Yes. Yes.
The story of Jonah.
Yes.
Yes, so I got really excited about that and that whole theme, and I'm almost finished with that book. And I think if you can get your hands on The Sin of Certainty, or How the Bible Actually Works, that will be amazing.
Really good. Anita says, I love how you can read the word so many times and God brings fresh revelation every time. Yeah, it's so true. It's so true. That's
absolutely good. How about one last question? So the Bible is full of genealogies.
Yes.
And how would you say that our roots inform
Yeah, it's a very
nowadays?
good question. I mean, I've been, we've talked about Celtic spirituality and just even the Irish way of life. We're an indigenous people, and it's interesting that I have connected deeply at my very core with other indigenous peoples around the world, and they've connected with me. I don't even know how to describe it. We were in the outback with a group of pastors, and small group, and a couple of the pastors, they wanted skin names. And so
you don't ask for a skin name.
I know they wanted for skin names, but only two of us actually were given skin names, and I was one of the people that was given a skin name without asking for it. And it was just an amazing thing, because as I thought over it, I realized different times in my life where I've communicated with people in a manner other than that, and it has not necessarily gone well for me, So, but also, our view of hospitality, openness, the wildness, the ruggedness of the Irish landscape, my love of water, sea, tides, moons, stars, nature, springtime, harvest, all those good things that I think Irish people are quite we enjoy the rhythm of life.
The circle
and traditions.
It's interesting. I was doing what's called the Tree of Life. It's a kind of narrative therapy situation where you basically draw a tree, and different parts of the tree represent different parts of your life. And the person who was running this kind of workshop was talking about how she'd done this Tree of Life with Caucasian people, and she'd also done the Tree of Life with Indigenous children. And the main difference that she could find was that with the Indigenous kids, the roots part was what took up most of the piece of paper.
Wow.
And the tree and the leaves took up this part of the paper. And with the white kids, the roots took up the bottom part of the paper, and the tree themselves, the individuality, was the big part. And I think that there's a lot we can learn from the collective, from our roots, and I think that's why I find genealogy so special in the Bible. It's all about remembering what came before us. And so maybe what we can do over the next so long while you're in lockdown is have a look into your ancestry.
I know a few people are doing that.
Have a look into your heritage, and what does that give to you, and how does that inform your faith? How does it not inform your faith? Maybe you can look into the Tree of Life and see if that exercise is life-giving to you, because I think that there's a lot we can learn from there.
I found out when we did our family tree that in every generation someone went to Australia for 5 generations.
Really? That's so fascinating.
So I was the one from my group of people, which is quite extraordinary.
Well, speaking of families, we're living with 3 generations of our family in the house at the moment. What's that been like?
Well, it's interesting because I see my parents and how their views informed my life, and then I see how that has informed how I've parented. So I was wondering more from your perspective, have you seeing mom and dad here and then me? Have you seen more of an insight?
I mean, we're all in different generations, so it's so fascinating because there's different things that we prioritize and different things that we don't prioritize. So the clash of that has been interesting.
So what are some of those for you?
Oh, let's see. I can't, that's a bigger thing that I have to think about. But the thing that I've noticed is the I've said generational so many times, but what's happened is the way Nana talks to you, you talk to me. The way I talk to you, you talk to Nana. So it's this cyclical thing in the women. I mean, we don't have dad's parents here, but yeah, it's been interesting to see your side of the family and seeing. I'm trying to connect more to my Irish side these days. Well, it's 9:00 now that I've seen it.
It is. Your Irish accent's stronger than ever, Christie Buckingham. Yes, it is.
Well, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. And for those of you who will watch this later on in the week, hope you have a beautiful week. God bless. Look after yourselves. Be kind.
Take care. And don't spend the next 2 weeks wishing them away.
And watch The Social Dilemma.
And watch The Social Dilemma. And there is a gift in every day. It just might not have the wrapping on it that you like. Seriously.
Bye.
Bye.